Globalization is a process that occurs when national economies trade services or products across borders. Also, globalization deals with the movement of money, workers, and technology. The first phase of globalization lasted until the Middle Ages. They traded through relations that crossed cultural boundaries and empires. The second stage was when the European global trade started. Sea routes were the main form of transportation throughout Europe. Precious metals was a primary method of payment. However, luxury goods were also a way that individuals paid for trading. Globalization today. Currently, we're living in the third globalization era, which includes a vast debt bubble in the private and public sector. Free trade and the China world trade has helped decrease the cost of products. Some products are made overseas where labor cost is cheaper than making them in the United States. Now, the concern that companies have with globalization is when they expand into foreign markets that have a large focus on cultural differences from the company's home market.
Over the years, Walmart has made attempts to venture into foreign markets with little success. For example, when the company attempted to move into the South Korean, Japanese, and German markets, they did not take into account the shopping preferences, aesthetic preferences, or cultural values and differences that exist in these countries, and it ended up failing because they presented themselves in the same way that they would have in the US. Best Buy had a similar issue when trying to move into the UK and other markets because they did not adjust for store preferences there and instead stuck to their large box stores. Coca-Cola has had failure, particularly with the ways they have marketed their product in foreign markets. In Saudi Arabia, they released a controversial commercial that hit touchy social issues, sparking a very negative reaction. In addition, when Coke released their Share a Coke With campaign, Israelis were upset because there were no names that suited them, and they identify with their culture more than their names anyway. Home Depot had troubles moving into the Chinese market because in China, doing it yourself insinuates that you're poor. Needless to say, the chain quickly failed there. Some successes within globalization that we will go on to discuss in further detail are McDonald's, Marriott, and Johnson & Johnson.
Given the fact that McDonald's is one of the largest fast food restaurants in the world, with over 35,000 locations in over 120 countries, it is vital that they offer a variety of different products to satisfy the cultural standards of a specific location, while still staying true to their brand. With over 40% of the locations being positioned in the United States, McDonald's understood the importance of engaging in globalization to newer markets that were yet to be explored. McDonald's attention to globalization has proven to be working given the recent positive earnings reports of their global segments. When we look at the backbone of what is allowing McDonald's to have success overseas, it comes down to understanding both the formal and informal institutions that are operating within that country. Formal institution examples are minimum wage laws and taxes that determine the price point they would be able to sell their products and so make a profit. While informal institution examples include dietary preferences and religions within the culture. To tackle this issue, McDonald's has engaged in strategic change to offer different market segments, different products, and at a different price point. When looking at the different price points of McDonald's top-selling item, the Big Mac, we see that prices and products are very different. Using 4 countries as examples, we see that Sweden is the most expensive, followed by the US, Japan, and then India, which has the cheapest Big Mac in the world. Given Sweden's high taxes and generally higher wages, we see that they are marketed a more premium burger option. In the United States, we see that despite adding more items for the health-conscious consumer, they are still selling plenty of traditional cheeseburgers and are continuing to market them heavily. In Japan, although prices are lower than the US and Sweden, they still offer a very wide variety of options to appeal to the Japanese demographic, such as a teriyaki Big Mac or McNuggets with wasabi sauce. Lastly, when we look at McDonald's strategic approach to India, we see that there are many factors that need to be understood. Given that 80% of the Indians identify as Hindu and thus don't eat beef, McDonald's made the choice to not offer a traditional hamburger there. Instead, they offered both chicken and veggie patty Big Macs. This has allowed Indian McDonald's to have the lowest Big Mac cost in the world, which also ties into benefiting the consumer base of a country that is still considered an emerging economy.
To engage in globalist strategies, a popularly powerful strategic inventions that organizations utilize is mergers and acquisitions. Mergers and acquisitions are beneficial due to the acquired or merging companies having a market advantage or desirable asset and quickly acquiring them into the business. This saves companies costs, such as research and development and marketing analytics, that would normally be warranted if the organizations were to create the acquired or merging company's desired assets from scratch.
We expect the mergers and acquisition market for 2018 to be a continuation of companies being highly motivated to use M&A as a catalyst for equity value creation. One of the trends we've seen in 2017 and we expect to continue throughout 2018 is the blurring of lines between industry sectors and companies willing to move outside of what has traditionally been the sector that they've been known to play in.
Brand acquisition via M&A is one way to grab companies that are already present in the markets that the organizations wish to expand to. Starwood had a stronger presence in the Asian Pacific area than Marriott, and Marriott wanted to capitalize on the growing Asian tourism market. Marriott acquired Starwood's 13 hotel brands for $13.6 billion in 2015, increasing the distribution of properties from 199 to over 480 within the Asian Pacific region alone.
Effective efforts to address and integrate multiculturalism is absolutely essential for companies who embark on globalization. While many aspects of globalization are tactical in nature, multiculturalism is the thread that connects all aspects of the change initiative, from HR to marketing to product and service, connecting organizations to employees first, and then to customers in transformative ways. Organizations are initiating targeted change efforts toward multiculturalism, which include diversity, equity, and inclusion, in increasing numbers, and must do so in order to successfully globalize their company. Johnson & Johnson is an innovative leader in multiculturalism, diversity, and inclusion practices, and has found ways to stay on the cutting edge, counting it as a core value of all business practices.
An inclusive culture means that everybody feels that they belong.
Whenever you can bring diverse opinions, experiences, people with diverse cultures together in a room, you have an opportunity to really look at a problem from different angles, and I think that allows us to bring solutions to the table.
I make sure that I surround myself with people who think differently than me.
Being your true self, being your authentic self, being able to bring your entire life with you to the workplace is fundamentally critical.
Having immigrated to the States really kind of gave me a broad perspective of, all sorts of people, backgrounds, experiences, and I see myself using that every day at home and at work.
People with different abilities can bring value to the business.
This is all about working in this moment collectively, unified as J&J employees to really embrace diversity and inclusion.
It becomes part of our DNA. It's who we are. It should be pretty much woven into the fabric of our culture.
To Johnson & Johnson, multiculturalism is valuable in and of itself, but it's ultimately a business-enhancing decision. Johnson & Johnson is an industry leader in multicultural and diversity efforts that begin with HR practices and ultimately lead to product innovation and consumer loyalty. When it comes to multiculturalism, at Johnson & Johnson, their global strategy is to be locally relevant. And to do this, they've started at home. Through their human resource practices, Johnson & Johnson has endeavored to support their globalization efforts by building a more diverse workforce. This starts with their leaders, who work through structured e-learning sessions, training sessions with the likes of Harvard equity professors, and pay structure that is tied to inclusive hiring. Johnson & Johnson recruitment strategies are interwoven with multiculturalism efforts. Most notably, Johnson & Johnson developed the Scientist Mentoring and Diversity Program, which pairs ethnically diverse students at the baccalaureate, master, or PhD level and early career researchers with industry mentors who work at companies in the medical technology, biotechnology, and consumer healthcare industries. With their mentors, scholars attend a 5-day training session to learn about career opportunities in industry and receive career development coaching. This initiative is beneficial to students regardless of their eventual place of work, but it directly builds a multicultural workforce pipeline for Johnson & Johnson while also sending market signals of diversity to consumers and strengthening the culture of inclusion that they strive for. Johnson & Johnson also embeds diversity training at every level and provides inclusive benefits to attract diverse, multicultural talent. Creating this diverse workforce and local cultural expertise has led to culturally relevant product innovation. Peter Fasolo, Chief Human Resources Officer, says that because Johnson & Johnson is an innovative company, quote, "We need a global workforce that not only represents our customers and patients, but also constantly brings in new insights." A great example of this was seen in their Malaysian market. In this predominantly Muslim culture, a Listerine product that contains alcohol is not a viable offering. Because of Johnson & Johnson's multicultural workforce, a forward-thinking and inclusive employee had the freedom to innovate and create a green tea-based mouthwash that was alcohol-free. The product made Johnson & Johnson locally relevant and increased their market share by 7%. With these kinds of efforts toward multiculturalism in their globalization efforts, Johnson & Johnson has truly stayed on the cutting edge of innovation. In order to make the strategic change toward globalization, keep these things in mind. 1. Multiculturalism must be at the heart of the change effort, and it should start with leader-driven HR efforts. 2. When it comes to marketing and product development, know where you're going. What works with one location, culture, or market segment will not necessarily work with another. And 3, once you know where you're going, know your capacity. If an organization's current bandwidth is a barrier to globalization, consider mergers and acquisitions with other organizations as a way to expand.